Baylor Bears have advanced to the national championship game, and this one was over early. Baylor up 45-20 at halftime. This was never in doubt. They cruised 78-59 over Houston, and now they await the winner of UCLA and Gonzaga. 5 Bears finished in double figures. Key here, the first half. Other than Marcus Sasser, Houston made exactly 1 hoop as a team. While Baylor in that first half, 8 of 15 from 3. Second half could have been played with a running clock. This was a non-competitive game. They get it done. The Baylor Bears will be playing on Monday night. So you see there, it was really very, very, very one-sided. You gave the 5 points with Baylor. You didn't sweat this one at all. Houston went to the money line. Baylor went to the money line as well. They're minus 250. Over came in very late, in the last 30 seconds, so hopefully you had Baylor and the over. Let's send it out to Indy. Hakeem Dermish, Gary Parrish, Avery Johnson, and Tim Doyle on the scene.
Hey, thank you. And Kenny White had both Baylor and the over in this one, so he goes 2 for 2 in this first national semifinal game. And Gary, I'll start with you here because this looked like the Baylor beginning of the season. Baylor shooting lights out from beyond the arc, and of course this game was over at halftime.
It was over at halftime, and Baylor was terrific from the opening tip to the final buzzer. You know, the Bears, as you noted, started 17-0. Then they had to go on COVID pause. And even Scott Drew would tell you, they weren't the same team when they came back. They weren't shooting the same way. They weren't guarding the same way. But you saw A-level Baylor in this game. Keep in mind, the opponent was Houston, a team that ranks top 10 in adjusted offensive efficiency and top 10 in adjusted defensive efficiency, according to KenPom. In other words, Houston is great on offense, great on defense. They couldn't score on Baylor. They couldn't stop Baylor from scoring. Baylor in this game looked like a real challenger to Gonzaga, and I know we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but barring a big surprise in that building over there, we're going to have Gonzaga-Baylor on Monday night, and I know Gonzaga will be the favorite, and that'll be the team I pick to win. But, boy, if this Baylor team that showed up tonight shows up Monday night, the Zags will have their hands full.
And, Avery, I asked you pregame who the player was that needed to step up for Baylor, and you said Jared Butler. And he indeed stepped up, 17 points in the first half, 4 of 5 from beyond the arc. He looked fantastic, helping lead this Bears team to the national championship.
Yes, Hakeem, he almost didn't step up because if you remember early in the game, Dejon Jarreau, first and second, third play of the game, hurdled over Jared Butler, and he was fortunate that he didn't get hit in the back of the head with Jarreau's knee, but Jared Butler was spectacular. This kid was prolific from behind the three-point line. He took him off the bounce, and he had a really nice backdoor cut. But it wasn't only Jared Butler. It was that other guy who's the National Defensive Player of the Year, Davion Mitchell, who really controlled the game. 11 assists, no turnovers, unbelievable floor game. Right there, basically a double-double. We'll give him a point. And just really love what he did and the way he quarterbacked this team.
Yeah, Mitchell ended up with 12 points, 11 assists, and just wiped out Jarreau. That was really a massive difference in speed and athleticism, as Jarreau had back-to-back near triple-doubles coming into the game. And, Coach, he was really never a factor out there for Houston. Houston won the second half, but like we've all stated, the game was already over at that point because it was utter domination. And before the game, you and I... we both sort of kind of picked Houston to win the game, and we were texting at halftime, 25-point deficit. We did say if Baylor shoots 40% from 3, if Baylor does make 10-plus threes, Houston's going to be in trouble. Well, Hakeem, they did both of those.
Yeah, I warned you. I told you about the trend. I warned you that Baylor was 8-0 against the spread when they were favored by 8 points or less, and they were favored by 5, and they win by 19. I told you this. I told you Baylor was going to win this game. I told you they were going to cover this game. What I wouldn't have told you, Gary, is the fact that what happened to Houston in the first half. What was Baylor able to do to take them out of rhythm?
Well, first off, Houston only grabbed 5 offensive rebounds in the first 20 minutes. Their offensive rebounding percentage was around 28-29% in the first half. Under normal circumstances, it's like on nearly 40%. So the thing that makes Houston really great on the offensive end isn't that they make their first shots. They don't. They get their second shot or the third shot, and they make those, and they just weren't doing that in the first half at all. You combine that with the fact that Baylor got super hot from 3, and Baylor is, the number 1 3-point shooting team in America, but they don't take a lot of them. relative to, say, an Alabama. But they took 15 in the first half. They made a big number, and when you're having problems scoring because Baylor is locking you up, and Davion Mitchell was a big part of that, and then Baylor's going to get hot from three, that's lights out. That's how you go down 25 at the half. And at that point, it almost didn't matter what Houston or Baylor did in the second half. There was simply no scenario where Houston was going to be able to overcome a 25-point deficit against a team with multiple NBA players, against a team that was operating at that level.
Yeah, Houston had 9 turnovers in the first half. They finished with 11. And again, here you have this Baylor team in winning the turnover battle, and the differential is now plus 42 in this tournament, which is incredible. You go back to the game against Villanova, they had 16. And I think a lot of the times people think, well, Baylor is this high-scoring team, and they're not playing necessarily great defense. They proved that in this game.
No, they have 2 legitimate National Defensive Player of the Year guys on their roster in Mark Vidal and Davion Mitchell. So this is a great defensive team. They just hadn't been great lately. If you talk to Scott Drew, I did earlier in the week, he said, listen, when we came back, we weren't the same team at all. We slowly started becoming a better version of ourselves. Now I feel like we're starting to get it back on the defensive end. They started making shots a few games ago, but being dominant, overwhelming on the defensive end, that really hadn't showed up lately. They had slipped to around 30th in adjusted defensive efficiency. When they went on pause, they were top 5 in the country. The team we watched tonight looked like the team that was top 5 in the country, and there was just nothing there that was going to give Houston an opportunity to compete, much less upset. You know, Baylor didn't give them extra possessions via offensive rebounding. Baylor didn't turn the ball over. Why? Because they've got an NBA point guard running things. Baylor was shot making on them. This was, you know, if we played this game again tomorrow, it probably wouldn't go down this way. But Houston just got caught in a really bad spot. Baylor was doing everything Baylor can do well. It was doing well in this game.
Yeah, and Quentin Grimes, their leading scorer, had 0 points at halftime. So not a great start for Houston, and they just could never catch up. When you talk about this game overall, Avery, when you take a look at what Baylor was able to do, what does it say about the Bears to win this game?
Well, when you look at Baylor, it says that they were the much more balanced and deeper team. 32 points off of your bench, Tim, in the NCAA semifinal game, and it wasn't even close. I know some of Houston players got some points there in scrub time, but their bench, Houston's bench was stuck on 2 points for a long time, and Baylor's bench just absolutely annihilated Houston's bench. So it really showed that Baylor was the deeper team. They have an elite 8 a group of men that they can put in the game that Scott Drew has a lot of confidence in. But when you have not 1 but 2 point guards in Mitchell and Butler that can both play on and off the ball, what a dominant performance with a group of players that can all, from the perimeter, all of them can pass, dribble, and shoot.
You know, when you start breaking down the game, you mentioned the bench. That was a major edge. I thought Matthew Meyer came in with the mullet and all, banged down a 3, made a shot, made a play. Then Chuma Chachua was physical down low. Every aspect of the game was Baylor. And I felt like in the first half, and Eric mentioned this, and of course I had money on Houston, but besides Sasser, only one other person made a field goal. And honestly, if Sasser wasn't in like a crazy rhythm in the first half, Houston might have had 10 points. I mean, the way Baylor played in that first half, Gonzaga, the Pacers, I don't know who could beat them for that 20-minute segment. That's how much they were locked in. And then defensively, they just pushed Houston around. And then when they were winning on the backboards, I gave the William Wallace cry. I just went, mercy, because you knew that was going to be trouble, because we all thought that was going to be a clear Houston advantage. Instead, when you watch this game, it was a clear Baylor advantage, and this game was all Baylor. Yes, I don't think, like Gary said, it would go down like this 10 out of 10 times, but if they played 10 more times, I don't think Houston could get them.
Tim, you have said that Gonzaga has yet to be tested. And yeah, you can go back to West Coast Conference championship game where they were losing to BYU. But you take a look at Baylor. Baylor has faced adversity. They went on a 3-week pause. They came back and beat an Iowa State team that really had no business winning that game. Then they lose their first game of the season to Kansas, lose in the Big 12 semis to Oklahoma State. They have faced adversity. What does that mean for Baylor at this point now going into Monday night's national championship game?
Well, they could obviously go back to the drawing board and get better. I thought that was going to be a challenge. It's obviously a good challenge to be undefeated. But for Mark Few, right, he has nothing to point to as like bulletin board material where Scott Drew has that ability. I'm really worried if I'm Gonzaga and I watch that first half. Just the way Baylor's guards wipe you out. I mean, Giroux has been outstanding in this tournament. And, Coach, he really had no effect. Now, can they do the same thing to Suggs? I think they can.
Well, I think in the first half, Tim, what people really went kind of under the radar was Baylor's trapping of the Houston guards on the pick and rolls. And it really exposed Houston's lack of shooting at the 4 spot. Because once you trap the pick and roll and you don't have a lot of shooting at the 4 spot, then one guy can guard the other 2, and basically you can play 4 against 3. So I think against Gonzaga, they're going to try to trap Suggs. And once you trap Suggs and then deny Kispert, deny Timmy, then what's going to happen with the other 2 guys on the perimeter? Are they going to be able to make enough shots? You also look at Baylor's defense. When the ball went into the post, Baylor had a strategy where they wanted to trap the post from the baseline, and they basically pre-rotated the help defender over there, and that basically threw Houston off balance. So expect them, if Gonzaga wins this game, to employ that same strategy against Drew Timme.
Yeah, I don't know if there really is an if Gonzaga. It's going to really be by how many they win this game against UCLA. Sure, there could be the upset, one of the biggest upsets in NCAA tournament history. Could it happen? Yes. Is it likely to happen? Probably not at this point, because you take a look at what Gonzaga has put together, and UCLA probably won't be that big of a test. Now, when you match up these 2 teams, if in fact it is Gonzaga and Baylor in the national championship, what will Baylor have to do to keep Gonzaga in check?
I think it starts with being able to guard Drew Timme one-on-one. Like, you've got to be able to keep him under control. Not shut him down. You're not going to shut him down. He's an All-American. But you can keep him under control, and if you can do it with one person, that is ideal. You also have to slow them down in transition. Like, a lot of teams in the country are going to run off of misses. They'll run off of makes. They'll inbound it and just go. They'll throw it all the way down the court. And so far, what has been remarkable about the Zags in this tournament is that, sometimes the skeptics, the few that still exist, will point out through January and February, well, yeah, they're playing Pepperdine. Okay, sure, they're playing Pacific. Okay, fine, they're playing West Coast Conference teams, but they wouldn't do this if they're in the Big 12. They wouldn't do this if they're in the Big 10. Well, at this point, we've watched them play a great Big Ten team, and they did the same thing. We watched them play a great ACC team. They've done the same thing. We watched them in the most recent round play a great Big East team. They did the same thing. They are making these power conference schools look just as overwhelmed as West Coast Conference schools.
Yeah.
That hasn't always been the case, but it is the case with this team. I think sometimes we lose focus of what we are watching when we're watching with Gonzaga. It's not just a great team or the best team in the country. This is a historically great college basketball team that is 2 wins away from being the first undefeated national champion since 1976. I don't know how they would compare to teams from other eras, like a great UCLA team under John Wooden, because, you get Lou Alcindor for multiple years. That's a different deal. But certainly in modern history, in this century, we haven't really seen anything like this. They're elite offensively. They're elite defensively. They have multiple lottery picks. They have a future Hall of Fame coach. There is no weakness here. And the things that you don't try to take things away from them as much as you just try to slow them down, and you got to hope, honestly, that they're a little off. I think Baylor is the one team in the country that can actually line up and play with them. But Baylor will still be an underdog despite what we just saw in this game.
Yeah, Avery, you know Scott Drew pretty well. You know how happy and lucky and joyful he is and such a great encourager to his kids within his program and the support that he gets outside of it. And, of course, he resuscitated that program from 2003 when it was in shambles. When you look at what Scott Drew has been able to do here with Baylor, and if they are to line up against Gonzaga on Monday night, what's the scenario where Baylor could actually upset Gonzaga?
Well, I think the scenario is basically play a longer period of time than what they played against Houston. That first half against Houston, that first half can beat a lot of teams. And it can definitely play with Gonzaga because they played their game. They made three-point shots. Mitchell caused havoc on both ends of the floor. He got inside the defense. He found open teammates. They eliminated Houston's post-up offense. And I agree with Gary, if you can play Drew Timme one-on-one, give him different looks, trap him when appropriate, if you can get the ball out of Suggs' hands and maybe force other guys to make plays. But this Baylor team that showed up in the first half of this game, Jared Butler coming out of his shell and playing like one of the top 3 players in the country, Mitchell on both ends of the floor, the bench support, those 8 players that played in that first half, and play at a high level, that they can play with Gonzaga.
Coaches don't want to hear this, all right? So don't take offense to this, okay? But when you make threes and the ball is going through the hoop, you play harder on defense. You just do. It's natural tendency. When the ball goes through the rim, you know what you feel? You feel good about yourself. You give a little bit more energy. You give a little bit more effort. That was happening for Baylor. It wasn't happening for Houston, right? They were going drought, 9-0 run, 10-0 run. You lose confidence, and your effort just can't be the same. What happened today in the first half was an absolute perfect storm. They executed really well, but then at the end of the day, they made shots. If they would have made 2 threes in the first half, this would have been a 10-point game, and then that run to start the second half by Houston, now all of a sudden we have a ball game. But they made 8 first-half threes. They ended up making double-digit threes for the game, and then that was it. It just kind of went off the rails. So the three-point shot, Akeem, Gary, and Coach, it's so valuable, but coaches never want to hear that. They always want you to play hard all the time, but you play harder when the ball goes through the rim, and for Baylor, it went through the rim a lot at a very high percentage.
And I don't know
the one thing you can say about Baylor is they don't live and die by the 3. Yeah, go ahead, continue. Right. I was just saying that the thing about Baylor is they don't live and die by the 3.
No, they don't. And against Gonzaga, I don't know if it's going to be a perfect storm that my buddy Tim talked about, where Jared Butler is going to basically be tied with Gonzaga with a couple of minutes to go in the half in terms of scoring. There was a point in the first half where Jared Butler had 17 and Houston had 17. But I don't think that scenario is going to happen. So when you look at Baylor's got to force Gonzaga into turning the ball over. These teams they operate very efficiently overall offensively. I haven't seen an offense in college basketball in a long time like Gonzaga. How efficient they are, not just from behind the three-point line, but inside the three-point line.
Akeem, they still got to play this game, right? I just want to let everybody know they're still playing the next game, aren't they? Okay.
Right.
I don't want to go Denny Green. I feel like we crowned them. We crowned them already. We crowned them already.
Right.
Crying out loud.
Yeah. right. You want to crown them? I mean, look, they were supposed to play back in December, on December 5th, Gonzaga and Baylor at Bankers Life Fieldhouse here in Indianapolis. 4 months to the day, they might be playing at Lucas Oil Stadium on Monday. If you don't get excited about that, I don't know what's wrong with you. This is the matchup that we all want to see. This is not only good for college basketball, this is good for the sports world.
There is no question. It is wild, and I noticed this the other day as we were putting together CBS Sports All-American teams, how predictable a lot of the stuff at the top of the sport was in this season. Something's not predictable. Kentucky being bad, Duke being bad, Roy Williams retiring. But Luka Garza was the preseason National Player of the Year. He is also everybody's National Player of the Year right now. Gonzaga and Baylor were number 1 and number 2 in the preseason poll. They are probably going to play for the national championship. Jared Butler was a preseason All-American. He's a postseason All-American. Corey Kispert was a preseason All-American. He's a postseason All-American. This has We've taken a wild path to get here. It's been bumpy. Cancellations, postponements, pauses. We've seen it with both of these teams having to stop midseason at one point. Again, to your point, they couldn't play in December when they were supposed to play. But there is no better way, no more fitting way for this season to end on Monday night than with Gonzaga and Baylor squaring off with a national title. Because then whoever wins it, it is an amazing story. We always knew these teams could get here from November going on. But you go back 15 years, this is literally unimaginable. This is a small private school, Spokane, Washington, in the West Coast Conference that has turned into a national power. And the other program, 18 years ago when Scott Drew took over, was immersed in one of the most unthinkable tragedies a basketball program could ever go through. For people who are too young to maybe remember, a player literally murdered another player. Google it. That's what Scott Drew took over. So to have him in the title game, his school for the first time since 1948, the program for the first time under him, and facing off against that power that was never supposed to be a power in Gonzaga, this is really terrific stuff. Whoever wins it, it'll be documentary worthy.
So what you're saying is the preseason rankings, the CBS Sports Top 25 and 1 matter.
You know what? Somebody has actually done a study on this to sort of combat the cliche that preseason rankings don't mean anything. The truth is they are usually a very good representation of how a season is going to look. And this season, it was wildly accurate, at least at the very top.
Want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.